Welcome to People and Profit. I'm Kate Moody. My guest today is Mike Henry, Chief Executive Officer of BHP, the world's largest mining group. And we're here at the headquarters of the OECD, which is hosting the Conference of Paris for the International Economic Federation of the Americas. Mike, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start by talking about sustainability. It's a buzzword in pretty much every industry around the world. In the mining industry, there are sort of two areas where you're under pressure in this regard. One is the production of minerals for this broader race to net zero, and the other is the question of reducing your own carbon footprint. I want to start with that first point if we can. Things like switching to renewable energy or electric cars require different materials than older technology. Is BHP able to keep up with that switch in demand?
In fact, it's fundamental to the BHP strategy. And so if the two big growth areas for BHP are copper and potash. And if I just touch briefly on copper, wind turbines require 3 to 5 times as much copper per unit of electricity generated than a gas-fired power plant, for example. Electric vehicles require 4 times as much copper as an internal combustion engine. And so we have ongoing global growth in population, increasing urbanization, rising living standards, all already requiring more copper. Now with the energy transition and artificial intelligence, and all of these data centers are very copper intensive as well, compounding future demand for copper. BHP is already one of the world's largest producers of copper, but we've said we see this commodity as so attractive that we want more growth options, and we've developed more of those growth options within the portfolio. We have growth now in Australia, US, Chile, and more recently in Argentina. So it's been fundamental to how we think about the business and where we're investing our growth capital.
A study last year suggested that 23 million people around the world are living in areas that are contaminated by chemicals that have been leaked from metal mining. Can you give us some concrete examples of how BHP is trying to rise to that challenge?
So great question, and it has multiple dimensions to it. So if we think about decarbonization, within BHP operations, we use a lot of diesel to run our haul trucks, our locomotives. We use a lot of electricity. And so we've had a big push on to reduce our Scope 1 and Scope 2, our operational emissions. And we've made a commitment to reduce them by 30% by 2030 relative to a 2020 baseline. We're well on track for that. We've said we have an ambition of being net zero by 2050. So far, our reductions have been achieved largely by moving to renewable power. The next big wave of reduction will come out of removing diesel from these big trucks that we use to move material on our sites and our locomotives to run our trains. There we're having to work with the equipment manufacturers to develop equipment that doesn't require diesel and instead run on electricity. But we expect that to play out over the end of this decade and into next decade. Of course, decarbonization is only one thing that we need to focus on. We need to focus on water stewardship, coming back to the point that you mentioned. There we've been moving progressively, in Chile, for example, away from use of water from aquifers to use of more desalinated water. So that that is a big area of focus for BHP. And then we need to ensure that for wastewater, that we're recycling as much of our water as we can, and that any water that's making its way off-site meets strict environmental standards. So it's been a big area of focus for us. I think it's important for the world. We touched earlier on the need for more copper globally. That's but one commodity. The world needs a lot more of other metals and minerals as well. If we're to do that in a way that doesn't have negative consequences for other aspects of environmental stewardship, we have to be setting and upholding high standards. And we are positioning BHP to be one of the trusted companies to do that, to be at the forefront of not just bringing on more supply, but doing so in a way that is ever more sustainable.
Now, we've been talking a lot about copper, one of the key elements in this energy transition. What are the other minerals and metals that BHP is being asked to produce, perhaps at a higher pace than you might have expected, say, 10 years ago?
So another area of growth for BHP is potash.
Which is potassium fertilizer.
It's potassium fertilizer. So it's one of the 3 main fertilizers that the world needs more of in order to produce more agricultural inputs. So world population growing from 8 billion today to 10 billion by 2050. Standards of living rising, which generally means more calorie-intensive diets, means that the world's going to have to produce a lot more agricultural product in the future than it does today, and yet we're having to do so off a constrained footprint of arable land. So the world's going to need more fertilizers. Potash is one of those key fertilizers, and BHP has the world's best undeveloped, now being developed, greenfield potash resources up in Canada. So we're currently investing $11 billion US into stage 1 and stage 2 of what's known as the Jansen project in Saskatchewan. So another exciting commodity for us. Outside of that, one thing that's not quite or well recognized, that even steel is going to benefit, for lack of a better word, from the energy transition, because all of the infrastructure that's required for the energy transition is steel intensive as well. And BHP has the world's lowest cost major iron ore business in the world in Western Australia. We're continuing to run that well. We're expanding from around 280 to 290 million tons of production today to 305 million tons in the coming years. And we've also indicated to the market that we have options, or we're developing options, to be able to expand from 305 to 330 million tons per annum if market circumstances warrant.
BHP has a large number of copper-intensive mines. More generally, is there enough copper in the world to keep up with this soaring demand, not just for your business?
I'm confident that there's enough copper units in the Earth's crust. The question is, will there be enough investment brought to bear on developing new deposits quickly enough? And that's really where the question lies, because even by 2050, we expect world copper demand to grow by up to 70%. In addition to that, copper deposits are constantly declining. So grade declines over time, which means just to stand still, more investment is required in either new mines or more processing capacity at existing mines, let alone to meet new demand. By our estimates, there could be up to $250 billion more investment required over the next decade to meet growing global demand for copper. And there's only a fraction of that that's already associated with known projects and is committed capital. So more has to be done to unlock more opportunities more quickly. And that comes back to making it easier, while maintaining high environmental standards, making it faster and easier to get new mines permitted. Capital markets need to be working in a way which flows capital to those companies that have the balance sheet capacity, the technical capability, and the approach to environmental stewardship that will allow them to bring those new mines on in a way that meets the world's need for copper, whilst doing so in a sustainable fashion.
Earlier this year, BHP walked away from an effort to take over competitor Anglo American. BHP did buy Philo Corp to help gain access to some of these key copper deposits in Chile and Argentina specifically. To what degree do you view consolidation and mergers as an important part of your medium to longer term future here?
So I'll talk about the industry first. I do think that over time there will be a level of aggregation to scale in the industry, because these new deposits are becoming harder to find, requiring more capital to develop, with more risks, either technical risks or above ground risks that need to be managed. And the companies that are able to fund these projects and develop them well are going to be companies that have high standards and are large companies like BHP. M&A specifically is but one of the growth levers for BHP. And we've been clear that the company can never be reliant upon M&A for growth, and we aren't. We've developed a whole suite of growth options based on our existing resources, and through smaller acquisitions or acquisitions of earlier stage deposits, like the one that we've done together with another company in Canada. So we partnered with a company called Lundin Mining to acquire Filo Resources, which has this large deposit in Argentina. Through those efforts, we now have growth opportunities, significant growth opportunities in copper in 4 jurisdictions globally: Australia, US, Chile, and Argentina. For M&A, it would only be for the select few opportunities where it's aligned on commodity, the assets are of a quality that is aligned with BHP's strategy, and where further shareholder value can be created through BHP's ownership.
Both the United States and European Union at the moment are looking to sort of break up China's dominance on certain critical minerals. Is resource protectionism, for lack of a better word, affecting the way you do business?
So we are seeing a resurgence in industrial policy and trade protectionism globally, and there's been a a significant increase over the past 3 to 5 years in critical mineral supply chain security, driven by, in some instances, strategic competition. But also, as we saw through COVID, I think awareness around supply chain fragility for a whole host of things, not just commodities, but manufactured goods as well, was laid bare, and governments are responding to that by wanting to ensure that supply chains for the inputs that drive their economies are well understood and are secure. And as a result of that, we are seeing some focus, and it's very much commodity specific, but some focus on how governments can support greater supply chain security. Sometimes that's associated with the upstream resource. Sometimes it's associated with processing capacity. And it gets resolved through enabling domestic, a greater enablement of mining of domestic resources through permitting reform, but also through collaboration across border to support the development of resources in other jurisdictions that can then supply metals and minerals into the countries in question.
I want to briefly touch on a couple legal issues that BHP has been facing. The company recently made a pretty large settlement in Brazil over the 2015 collapse of a dam there. More than 600,000 victims have still joined forces for a class action lawsuit on that same issue in the UK. Will BHP be seeking a separate settlement there?
So we continue to defend the UK case strongly. The backdrop here is back in 2015, there was a very tragic collapse of a tailings dam in a company that was jointly owned by BHP. So it was an independent company, but had joint ownership between ourselves and Vale, a Brazilian mining company. That dam collapsed and it displaced people. There was loss of life associated with it. And BHP made a very strong commitment immediately post that dam disaster that we would stand behind ensuring that there was resettlement of people, that there was environmental remediation, and that there was compensation paid out to people impacted by the dam disaster. In the period since, there's been $8 billion, roughly $8 billion of expenditure on the part of Renova, which is a foundation that was set up by Samarco, which was this independent company, for compensation for over 400,000 victims and for environmental remediation and resettlement. The recent settlement that you refer to in Brazil, about $32 billion headline level, paid out over a period of time, includes the amounts paid out to date. We'll see further compensation available to impacted individuals, further funding of remediation, and other initiatives. And our position on the UK case is that there's mechanisms in place for compensation to be secured now in Brazil, and that's the proper avenue for compensation to be sought. And so we have and will continue to defend the UK case strongly.
And that case will be going on. Separately, a group of women in Australia filed a suit alleging that they were sexually harassed while working at BHP. What are you doing to ensure the safety of your female employees?
Yeah, so this suit that was lodged in recent days covers the period from 2003 until relatively recent times. I am on the record as acknowledging that this totally unacceptable behavior has occurred in the company, in the industry, and beyond historically. Now, from a BHP perspective, we've been taking very strong steps to eliminate this behavior from BHP. Back in 2018, we declared sexual harassment as being a safety risk within the company. And the significance of that in the mining company is it gets managed in the same way as any other safety risk then. There is a team that was established reporting directly into me to ensure that we had the policies in place, the mechanisms in place, policies in place to stop this behavior from happening, mechanisms in place for it to be reported and investigated and addressed. And we've invested over $500 million in upgrading our camp security and camp quality globally. Now, alongside these measures, we've seen female participation in the BHP workforce go from 16 or 17% back in 2016 to approaching 40% today. So over a doubling of the female participation in the workforce, as we've focused on improving culture and making it a safe place for women and everyone else to work. It's an issue that we take incredibly seriously, and we are very committed to eliminating this sort of behavior from the company.
As we head into 2025, are you expecting to see any impact or challenge to the way that you do business under the second Trump administration?
So I think what we're seeing play out globally now is greater focus on trade policy. In some instances, those can be protectionist policies, a resurgence in industrial policy, and it's something that we keep a close eye on in terms of its near-term implications for trade flows and so on. However, BHP is a long-term company. We're supplying resources to the world. And one thing I'm confident of is that in spite of some of the near-term disruptions that can be created as governments implement new policies, be it in the US or Europe or elsewhere, global demand for the commodities that BHP produces is going to continue to grow strongly, and we're positioning BHP to be a primary supplier of choice.
Still lots of uncertainty there. Mike Henry, CEO of the mining giant BHP, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching. Stay tuned to France 24.